What if I told you that a highly decorated U.S. Special Forces veteran, someone who led missions from Iraq to the Pacific, once said without hesitation that the toughest, bravest, and most reliable soldiers he ever worked with weren't Navy SEALs, British SAS, or even Marines, but Filipino soldiers? These were men who trained barefoot in the jungle, who shared their last bit of food with strangers, who joked before going into battle and prayed afterward. His name was Master Sergeant Ethan Cole, a soldier with 22 years of combat experience. He had been through more war zones than most people have had birthdays. But it wasn't until a mission in Mindanao, in the southern Philippines, that he saw something different. He expected a simple task: help train local soldiers, share tactics, maybe relax with some adobo and a cold drink. Instead, he was pulled into a real fight alongside Filipino scout rangers. Men who hiked 12 hours without complaint, crossed flooded rivers without fear, and still managed to laugh around a campfire like they were just on a holiday. One moment stuck with him. A young Filipino private, barely 19, was hit by shrapnel near his ribs. He was bleeding badly, but when the medic ran to help him, the young soldier waved him off and said, "Sir, help my teammate first. He's worse off. I can wait." Ethan froze. He'd seen courage before, but this was something deeper. Later, back at base, the same soldier apologized for slowing them down. That moment didn't break Ethan's confidence. It humbled him. He began to see Filipino soldiers not just as allies, but as examples of what all soldiers should be: selfless, loyal, and incredibly brave. There was also a woman in the unit, Lieutenant Reyes. She had sharp eyes, even sharper instincts, and led reconnaissance missions through jungle terrain that would scare even seasoned rangers. During one mission, under heavy fire, she led 3 wounded soldiers to safety. Ethan later found out it wasn't the first time she'd done that. It was the 5th. When he asked her why she always went back, she simply said, "If I don't, who will?" But the moment that stayed with Ethan the most didn't happen in a firefight. It happened in a remote village after a landslide. Half the town was buried. Soldiers and locals worked side by side to dig people out. It wasn't just during disasters that Ethan saw their strength. There was Corporal Jaime de la Cruz, once a fisherman from Iloilo, now in the reserves to support his family. He was quiet and humble, always the last to eat. But when a truck full of food got stuck in the mud during a storm, he tied a rope around his waist, walked chest deep into the muck, and spent hours hauling supplies. Just him, a rope, and a pair of old boots. Ethan asked, "Why didn't you wait for help?" Jaime just smiled and said, "Sir, the people were hungry. We don't wait when someone needs food." Another time, during a long hike, one soldier collapsed from heat stroke. Private Ramirez, short and skinny, picked up the man's rifle and backpack and carried him 2 kilometers back to camp. When the soldier woke up, he asked who had helped him, but Ramirez stayed silent, quietly cleaning his rifle in the corner. Ethan sat beside him and asked, "You okay?" Ramirez nodded. "Yes, sir, he's heavier than he looks." Then he added, "He's my team." That's all. By then, Ethan had stopped trying to figure out what made these soldiers different. It wasn't just strength or training. It was the way they refused to let anyone fall alone. They carried each other, in body and in spirit, without waiting for orders or expecting praise. That night, Ethan joined a patrol through a muddy jungle trail. The rain had stopped, but the ground was slippery and the air was heavy. And he knew. He was walking beside the kind of warriors the world rarely sees, but should never forget. At the front of the patrol walked Second Lieutenant Morales. Just 25 years old, he had calm eyes and a steady voice. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. One simple nod, and the whole squad moved like they had practiced this path 100 times. Ethan watched closely. At a small crossing, one soldier paused, clutched his rosary, and whispered a quiet prayer. Then he moved on, calm and focused. Further back, a young recruit's hands shook as he adjusted his weapon. He looked nervous. Without saying much, an older sergeant named Victor Abad walked beside him. No shouting, just a hand on the shoulder and a few quiet words in Tagalog. Whatever he said worked. The young man stood taller and kept walking. The patrol moved quietly through the jungle. Their boots barely made a sound on the wet ground. Each soldier kept watch over the others. Ethan, walking near the back, noticed something strange. No one looked at their watches. No one complained about the mud. No one asked how far they had left. They just kept going, not because they had to, but because they refused to let the others walk alone. Yes, it was discipline, but it was also something deeper, a kind of sacred trust, a quiet faith in each other. Later, in a nearby village, a little girl ran up and handed Ethan a drawing. Two soldiers, one American, one Filipino, stood under a sun and three stars. She had written four simple words: "Thank you for not leaving." That night under the stars, Ethan held the drawing and realized it wasn't about tactics. It wasn't about gear. It wasn't even about the mission. It was about heart. The next day, their final drill was supposed to be a flood rescue simulation in a storm-prone area near Bataan. But then the real storm came. Flash floods, power outages, people panicking. And without waiting for orders, the Filipino soldiers moved. Fast. One soldier, Sergeant Alano, jumped straight into a raging river to save a child trapped in a jeepney. The current was wild. Ethan tried to follow but couldn't keep up. When they finally pulled both of them out, soaking wet and gasping for air, the little boy clung to Alano's vest and whispered, "Salamat kuya." "Thank you, big brother." That night by the fire, Ethan turned to his team and said something they didn't expect. "I've worked with legends, but these guys, these Filipinos, they're the kind of soldiers you pray are on your side." Before he left, Ethan stood in front of the unit. He held up the little girl's crayon drawing and said, "You don't just fight with skill, you fight with soul. You're not just warriors, you're family, and I'm honored to have stood beside you." No one clapped, no one cheered, just silence. The kind of silence that says something sacred just happened. Back in the U.S., Master Sergeant Ethan Cole would later tell every new recruit the same thing. "You want to know what real courage looks like? Go meet a Filipino soldier." And maybe he's right, because in a world full of medals, ranks, and loud voices, it's the quiet soldier. The one who shares his last meal, dives into the storm, and prays before the fight. That soldier isn't just brave. He's something more. He's Filipino.